Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the first ever episode 30 of Cloud Control. We've made it to the big episode 30 for the second time, of course, for those who have been paying attention for any length of time. Kate, it's a big episode for us today. It's our Final Fantasy XVI episode. And not only that, but we're doing something very unique and recording the show backwards today.
Yeah. I guess that's
Wow.
true. You might notice, I
up.
think I've gotten changed since we last I went to the gym in between. We recorded our Nintendo Direct, and it was funny. We were going to record it all in one go, and we were talking about Final Fantasy, and we were talking about where we were at. And James said to me, he's like, no. He's like, no, we're not doing this. You have an hour more you have to play. Because I was like right on the precipice of some crazy shit happening. And after playing that hour, I can say that was like one of the best decisions you've ever made for me in my entire life.
That I like to think I haven't made a lot of decisions for you in your life, but this is one I'm proud of.
Okay, a suggestion perhaps, but I literally just finished playing and I have not processed it yet. But holy shit, this game, it does not slow down.
It's pretty insane. So yeah, well, we're going to get right into Final Fantasy, of course. And then the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about the Nintendo Direct, something we talked about earlier this morning when the lighting in both of our rooms was far worse. So apologies for that, but you can actually see us now. God, we need to get some proper lighting now, don't we? We need to upgrade a little bit, but who cares? We're here to talk about Final Fantasy, so that's exactly what we're going to do. And we got a little bit of a structure for this game. Just because it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be an expansive conversation. So this is what we're thinking. We both played up to a certain pretty good stopping point in the game so far. And so what we're going to do today on this episode is give our spoiler-free kind of overall impressions of the game, what we think so far after playing about 10 hours or so. Then we're going to get into kind of mechanical spoiler territory for the second part of the chat. And then we'll end off with like story spoilers and the stuff you definitely would want to avoid if you're planning to play the game, because trust me, you don't want this stuff spoiled. This game is nuts. So if that sounds good, that's what we're going to do today. And then with every subsequent episode kind of throughout the next few weeks, we're definitely both going to be playing a lot of this game, and we're going to kind of pick landmarks that make sense to talk about the game in chunks and sort of give an update every week as one of the segments on this show. So that's our plan. And of course, we'll end the show off with listener mail today as well. Forgot to mention that. Kate, is there anything I'm missing about Final Fantasy now that I've laid that out? I don't think so.
I think we just need to talk about Final Fantasy because we have not done that yet.
Okay. Well, in that case, I've written a little bit of a synopsis here for the listeners, so I'll read that out quickly and then we'll get into the game. Okay. So the story takes place within the world of Valisthea, where there is a blight taking over the land, causing tensions and war between 6 powerful nations. Each holds immense power within giant magical crystals known as the power of the Icons. And while most warfare is being fought using traditional armies and warfare strategies, or at least as traditional as they can be within, the world of Final Fantasy, these crystals hold the power of the Icons, which they can take the form of classic Final Fantasy summons like Phoenix, Bahamut, Shiva, etc. Dominants, people who can harness the power of these crystals, exist within the world, one of them per kingdom, and they're given no choice but to use this power to fight for their kingdom to match the power of the other nations. So this game has a lot to say about discrimination, and we'll probably chat about that later as we go. You play as Clive Rosfeld, who is the firstborn son of the Kingdom of Rosaria's ruling family, who is passed over as successor because his younger brother Joshua becomes the dominant of the Phoenix instead of him. You're a sworn protector of Joshua when the game begins, one of his shields, and an Imperial bearer who's marked forever as a second-class citizen by a very distinct facial tattoo, even despite royal lineage. And I ask now, where will Clive's adventure take him? Will he overcome the several challenges that befall him early and often within the game? Will he do his part in fighting for equality within Valisthea? And, most importantly, will he ever get to ride on Goats's special chair?
I hope that's how the game ends. like, all right, guys, we did whatever we came to do. Time to go home. You get to ride on Ghost.
Only time will tell. Only time will tell. So, I just want to say right off the bat that I've really enjoyed this game so far. I mean, I've got some small nitpicks I'm sure we'll get to at some point. But overall, I mean, this has been just an amazing game to play, and it really just gets better the more you do play. But I wanted to start off really by asking you, Kate, as someone who really hasn't played a lot of Final Fantasy or really even a lot of like stylish kind of action combat games, kind of what your first impressions were. What do you think of Final Fantasy 16?
Oh man, I'm eating good today, is what I'm saying. I think I've become a very lucky person in the realm of Final Fantasy because if anyone remembers, there was a lot of hype leading up to this game. I know, James, you were super excited about it. Every time it showed up at an awards show or at a like presentation or conference, it would be like Final Fantasy, like I'm
Yeah.
pre-ordering, it's gonna be awesome.
This is probably my most anticipated game of the year, I would say.
Yeah. And every time it came up, I would spout, like, I don't really ever play Final Fantasy games. They're not my cup of tea. I'm never interested, aside from Final Fantasy Tactics, but that's like a totally different thing. And then the more I saw about this game, the more I started to think, like, this actually looks cool. I'm maybe into it. And I was thinking, like, it really depends on how it feels. Like, I don't know, I'll watch you play some. And like I didn't want to play it. And then the more I saw, the more I thought, maybe I secretly do. And I am like addicted to this game. Like, I got up this morning and I had like an hour free time to spend before I had to do some errands, go to the gym, that kind of stuff. And I'm literally in the middle of playing Bloodborne right now. And I sat down and I was like, now I'm going to play Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
So that's how good it is. Yeah, I think I'm kind of like in this perfect lucky sweet spot with the game because I know like it's mostly getting really amazing reviews online, but a lot of the criticisms I've seen and the people that dislike the game is because it's not Final Fantasy enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit of a departure from, I suppose, what was the traditional style of Final Fantasy game. And even like 7 Remake feels a lot different from this, from to what I understand.
Yeah, it's very different.
And to me, that's like why I like the game, is because I'm not a traditional Final Fantasy game, but the way that this game is styled and the way that the combat feels is so much more appealing to me, and I'm enjoying it so much as this kind of like blend of like like traditional Final Fantasy world, which I've always thought was cool, but then also like this new like action combat, and it's very linear, and these are just all things that like that's why I'm into the game this time. So I guess I could see why you'd be disappointed if you're a really like long-term fan and you just like the series the way it is, and then it goes in a little bit of a different direction. But for me, it's like, yes, I can finally play this series now. It's so cool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point too, because I mean, I get that there's a lot of people that are interested in Final Fantasy staying kind of turn-based and whatnot, because that's been, a large part of the history. But I've seen a good counterpoint to that too. Like, not to get like really sidetracked because I want to talk about this game, but every Final Fantasy is different, even if it's within the realm of like no 2 turn-based games have the same system aside from maybe like 1 and 2, the really old ones. And then all 3 of the most recent mainline ones have all been some variety of an action game. So it's not like Final Fantasy, like this is a really, really big departure. It's just a different combat within the action-focused games. Like one of the good things about Final Fantasy is that it's an anthology and no 2 games are alike. So, I think that's like to its benefit, but I don't know. That's just me. Anyway, where did you want to start with kind of the conversation here? Any aspect of the game that really stands out?
Yeah, so we'll start, I suppose, in less like in no spoiler territory, and then slightly build up through that. So just coming into it, I think that the world and the story is just super interesting to me. Like, I really like what you kind of lined out as they have these people who are, it's almost kind of like Avatar, but like backwards, where being the Avatar, being a bender is like considered a really negative thing in society. Like, they're really looked down on, like they're kind of like an inhuman monster sort of idea. But it's also, but like I kind of think that take is interesting, because normally like everyone would want to be someone who has these powers. Like, it's just objectively like something that people would want. But in this, like, they're so ostracized, and so that alone was kind of an interesting hook.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course like the story gets crazy, but like the Final Fantasy world, it's gorgeous. The creature designs are extremely interesting to me. Like I really like all the different icons, these like gods in the world, and they're kind of pulled from different like places in the world or different mythologies or different like folklores, and then they're kind of like blended into this like not super
Yeah.
accurate but like a Final Fantasy style soup instead.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of cool. I really like Clive. I know it's funny, some of the reviews I've seen are like, oh, if you don't like sticking with one character, you're gonna dislike this. And I guess that's like a thing. Final Fantasy is normally known for having like bigger parties, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, and more characters that you play as, whereas in 16 you like for the most part you are just Clive. You get characters that join in, and there's definitely a good supporting cast, but Clive is the central character, which I guess is there's always a main character, but that's a little bit of a departure, I suppose. But just kind of made me laugh. They're like, oh, if you don't like sticking with one character, this is going to be a bad time. And it's like, I get that for the Final Fantasy branding, but also like that's just normally how games work.
Yeah,
So
no.
like it's just kind of a weird thing to be like, if you don't like Clive, you're not gonna like this. It's like, well, if you don't like the main character of any game, you might,
It's a weird
struggle with
criticism for
that.
sure. Speaking of
Yeah.
Clive, like I think he's a killer character so far. I've made some notes as I've been
Yeah.
playing, and one thing I actually wrote down is my take couldn't be like more from the opposite of that. Like I've found throughout the Final Fantasy
Mm-hmm.
games that I've played, like I played a lot of 10 and I played 15, 13, all of those, like, and throughout pretty much universally through all those, even 7 remake that I played a couple of years ago, I would say that the main character of those games has never been like the strongest character. It's always been those side characters, whether it's Barret in Final Fantasy VII or like, Oron. I thought was so cool in Waka and Yu or Yuna, sorry, in 10. But in this game, like Sid is really cool, and there's some other characters that are fun. But I really think Clive himself is interesting. Like I guess some of the acting and writing maybe can be melodramatic at times, but I think that's just sort of part of Final Fantasy. And overall, I really like Clive's performance in the game, and like some of the lines he has, especially when he gets angry in some of the battles. Like I think he just kills it.
Called it already. I think like 3 hours into this game, I called. I was like, Clive's up for like voice acting. Like the voice actor for Clive, I'm blanking on his
I'm looking it
name.
up.
But I'm like, he's gonna win it at the Game Awards. Like
Mm-hmm.
like it's such a compelling performance, and especially because he's a character largely like driven by revenge, and Final Fantasy, like you said, is a little over the top, a little melodramatic, but I really buy into the performance. Like I think it suits the world because the world is a little bit over the top. So it's not like you have this really like grounded like everyday world. He's not just walking around the streets of London and like going 120%.
Mm-hmm.
It really suits the world, I think, and the circumstances that he's in. And, and I think the performance is fantastic. I think all the voice actors are amazing. I want to shout out to my boy Joshua, who's also Hugo,
Amicia.
Plague Tale. Amicia, the cutest voice in the entire world. The second I heard that, I was like, that's Hugo. I love this kid. If anything ever happens to this kid, I'm going to lose my mind. But yeah, the characters are really interesting. I think the world is neat. I'm just so on board with seeing where the story goes, and I think that's important for this game because a lot of it is watching cutscenes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
especially at the beginning. Like I was playing when I first started playing, I was with 2 other people, and I've been playing on my own since. I'm not going to be beholden to them, but just the day I got it, I was with company, and so we were playing it. I was like, oh, come, just play this game with me. It's really cool. And we were kind of passing the controller off, and we were making the joke where it's like, it's not your turn to play, it's your turn to hold the controller so you can feel like the controller vibrate as the cutscene plays out in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
definitely could
I could see
see.
that. Mhm.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, I mean, I definitely could see that being off-putting for some people, right? Like, it is largely the start of the game, like watching an episode of a TV show, and I think there's a context where that could be a detriment, but with this game, I actually think it works well enough. Just because number one, when you're playing, like the action is almost just nonstop, and you're really locked in, and you almost are glad to have a little 2 to 5 or 6 minute break, depending how many cutscenes there are, just to sort of enjoy the story. And the other thing is, like, the story itself is pretty complicated. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of different, locations and powers and all this stuff. And I think if it was to be communicated in a different way, like, audio going on while running around a map, or something you had to read, it would just be really lost on the player. And it's almost like the cutscenes are, number one, just stupidly gorgeous almost all the time, and number two, it's like, it's a really good way to make you pay attention to the story, I think. And it's so compelling. I think at the time just melts away anyway. Like, I'm so invested.
The exact same boat, and I really think the only reason that you wouldn't like this style is if you're really not a story person, like you're just here for the combat, like that might be a barrier. And I think it's also because the game is so focused, you don't have these larger sections where you're kind of exploring, and so that would be your downtime or your break from the really fast-paced, hectic action. So like you said, like, you have these cutscenes instead. I love it because, like, I think the story is interesting enough that I would just watch this as a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, it's like a movie that you break up with gameplay sequences and then you go back to watching the movie. And I think it's something I've never really experienced in a game so much, but I think it flows so well. Like, I could see why someone might think the start of the game is slow paced, but once you get like a couple hours in, I think it's like at a breakneck speed at all times. And I don't think I've ever sat through a cutscene and thought like it was slow or boring, or that it was like dragging the pace down. I think like there's so much happening and the story's progressing so much in every cutscene that it's just like, I almost can't believe how fast it's going.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of what you'd expect with that kind of setup.
Yeah, and it's because it's not like it plods around. Like, the cutscenes do not feel like wasted time at all. Like, there's a lot happening, and they're all very, like, to the point almost. Especially like on the side when you see some of the villain characters as they're going on. Like, they're still stereotypically like, they only talk in exposition about exactly the problem that's going on. Like, but I mean, I guess it saves a lot of time. If it really was like, thorough dialogue between every character, you'd be there for 3 times as long, and I think that would just be, not great. But I think it's awesome. And talking about the cutscenes, something we have to bring up right away, or for me at least, is the active time lore system. Because this, similar to a few years ago when I think it was Apex Legends was the first person game to do the ping in multiplayer, where you could point out a location, and all of a sudden, just like every game has that, it's standard. This has to become standard, in my opinion, in like RPGs and big open world stuff, because it's just so fascinatingly helpful. At any time, you can just hold the touchpad down, be it in a cutscene or in the world. You can just open the touchpad, hold it down, and what will pop up is a few points of interest or things you might need to know. So the location you're in, or the few characters you might be with, or whatever it is, and you can just click on it, and it'll give you a little bit of insight into who that person is, and just a little bit of flavor text. Short, snappy, easy to read, and oh my god, like, it's made everything so understandable and tangible, and like, you don't have to look up on the internet and risk spoilers. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and you're also not looking through this like massive codex. Like, it's not like in like a game like Mass Effect where you're like, oh, someone just like referred to this, this place, and I can't quite remember what that was because it's been 20 hours since I've seen it. So let me go in the menu and then go in the codex, and you're going through these like massive walls of text that are a little bit like difficult to navigate. Like, this is just exactly whatever's relevant to the scene, whatever you might need to know. And every single time I've used it so far, it is exactly what I wanted to find. Like, it has been like pinpoint perfect in terms of like, okay, these are the characters in the scene. Like, this is like, okay, this guy's branded, so you can read about the stereotypes of branded people, the tattoo, or like a group, or like, oh, this person has this icon, so now you can read about the god icon. And like, oh my god, it's so good. I find myself like pausing in cutscenes sometimes just to see what pops up, and then being delighted that it is like so well done.
Yeah, I feel like I have been minorly spoiled by it a couple of times. Just like a few details about like, in that there's a cutscene you and I watched very near the end of what we're going to talk about later, and there's something you see, and I got kind of like the identity of something spoiled to me, which is like very minor, and I'm sure we'll learn about it anyway, or maybe you could piece it together, but I guess it's not like immune from that kind of thing. And I think despite that, though, overall it's just like phenomenal.
Yeah. What I've noticed too is that it seems like it updates when you learn more information. So for example, like a character had like one description I remember reading when we first met them, and then as Clive throughout the story, I learned more information about them. I think it was about two characters that have a relationship that I didn't know they were connected at first. And so then the next time I went in after I learned that, they had like the icon because it tells you there's a little indication to show if you've read that entry or not before. And that character now had the sign like as if it was a new entry. And I clicked on it and it had updated it with some extra information that wasn't there the first time, but like would have been a spoiler at that time, but now I knew, so now it was updated to be like, and then also in addition to who they are, this is their relationship with this other person you now know about.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was incredibly cool.
Yeah, I'm sure you must have encountered the NPC with the tomes as well, right? In the that
Yes,
chocobo.
yes,
So there's a kind of an
yes.
expansion to this system too that isn't just part of the touchpad, but there's a certain NPC you can go. He's kind of a scholarly guy, and as you go, you can kind of go back and report Clive's stories, as it were, to him, and he's filling out tomes which are like chronicling the world basically and holding all this information. So you can go to him if you want sort of the more expansive archived version of this information where you can go click through everything that
Mm-hmm.
you've seen. But even that, like, despite having so much information in there, it's really well organized into like different categories and sort of suggests related information too. So if you're looking for information on, a certain aspect of someone's armor, you can click them and then it'll suggest like what you're looking for. It's just so intuitive. It's awesome stuff, and it levels up sort of as you report things to him as well. So I'm excited to see like what happens when I level up my tome. Like, am I gonna get a prize? I'm very curious.
I'm gonna get a prize, a treat for
The
me.
old man will give me a prize. Yeah.
I like that, man. Yeah, I love stuff like that. I always like that character who's like the old wizened one who's like, oh, I'm a collector of knowledge and I'm just here to pass along stories. And it's such
Hmm.
like an archetype, but I love that guy every single time.
Yeah, he's good.
And yeah, I don't know. I think that's like the best new game mechanic ever. It has a lot of quality of life things in this game I found. Like when you go like you find an item in the overworld that you run over, you don't actually have to click to pick it up. It just automatically goes to your inventory. And then if you're full on something, like one of the things about this game that I actually really like is that you're very limited on what consumables you can carry. So I think at least right now I can have like 4 regular potions and either 2 or 3 high potions and no more. And there's no storage, there isn't pick it up and then it goes to your bank to like,
Yeah, to
refresh
hold,
later.
take out of your chest.
And exactly. And you don't hold like 3,700 potions because maybe I'll need them later. It's just you have a slot for 4. And if you pick one up and you already have 4, it just automatically uses it because,
Hmm.
like that's otherwise, like in so many other games, I find like, okay, you see a potion and you like go to pick it up and you press the button. And then it's like, oh, your inventory is full. And so you're like, okay, go in the menu, use the potion, get out of the menu, pick up this potion, and then you're
Hmm.
like, yes, optimize. But in this game, it just does that for you. It's actually so nice.
Yeah, yeah. It's totally
Yeah.
true. And I think these modern RPGs, the last maybe like, I'd say maybe 2 to 3, 4 maybe years have really become like this sort of limited inventory practice has become a standard amongst the
Mm-hmm.
ones that seem to stand out, which is kind of crack the code in terms of like people like you and I who just hoard all of our healing items for the final battle because God knows you'll need 35 of the basic healing item in the final battle where it heals insignificant
You never
HP.
know. You
But
never know
like,
how
I'm in the
crazy
same
it's
boat.
gonna
I'm in the same
be.
boat. But I love that
Yeah.
about this game too. I was gonna say, like, this is the game. I was gonna say this game does two of our favorite games, Kate, are Persona and Bloodborne. And this game does something better than Bloodborne, which is that like this solves that problem. If Bloodborne just did its health files like this game does its potions,
Yeah.
Bloodborne would
Yeah.
be basically perfect.
That's true. That is the biggest flaw of that game, and
But
this game is just
you know,
like dancing on it right
regardless,
now.
regardless. I think we might be about to move into sort of spoiler territory coming up. If you
Yeah.
don't don't worry.
I think there's maybe one more thing
thing?
is just like a
Okay.
basic overview of how the combat feels
Sure, yeah.
before getting into like the
Okay.
combat is evolving as we play,
Yeah.
and I
Okay.
won't want to spoil
Yeah.
it any past that, but
So
just the basics.
I was just going to say, before we get into the combat, because I think that leads us so perfectly in, I have just a fun fact about this game that I want people
Okay.
to chew on just before, because I don't want people to leave for the spoilers and not think about it. So,
Okay.
as you said, this Final Fantasy is a lot more, your speed than some of the older ones. And so it made me think, like, comparing this to a game like God of War, I actually think God of War so far had like more RPG elements than this game does. This is actually more action focused as far as like being more focused, but it just made me think, okay, so God of War originally came out in 2005, and what was the equivalent Final Fantasy to that, and like how homogenized have like these two very different genres become over the years? And so think of this. This game obviously is very different than Ragnarok, but they share a lot of DNA, basically, right? If you think about it. And so at the time, in 2005, God of War came out, the original. Remember, it's very action-focused, all that stuff. The equivalent Final Fantasy that came out 1 year later was Final Fantasy XII, which is strictly turn-based on the PS2, like very what you were talking about before, about like picking up the potions and all this stuff. And it's just interesting to think about like the lineage of these games, and now they're very similar in a lot of ways. So food for thought. Anyway, I think it just talks about like appealing to a mass audience, right? Like both have changed a lot and then become more mainstream, and that's why like they're becoming more similar now, because that's what sells. But I don't know. Anyway, combat.
So combat was basically the deal breaker for me, because I know that the Devil May Cry combat genius, and that was concerning to me because it's just not a franchise I've ever been interested in. To its credit, I actually might try out.
Oh my god, eating some crow here.
I mean, it's not like on the first part of my list, but I might not write it off now. At least the newer games. I played the original Devil May Cry and just didn't love it. It wasn't for me. I have a weird thing against aerial combos. I don't know why, but the second I'm like up in the air comboing shit, I'm out.
Okay. Let's just say, we always say one of the best parts of doing podcasts is expanding our horizons and playing different stuff. So when it happens and something clicks, like it's a great feeling.
Exactly. So I went in this game knowing that. I was like, please don't be a hack and slash. And it's really this strange hybrid. I felt like it took a little bit of playing to really get a feel for it, because it is tactical, but it's also really fast-paced and chaotic. And so I had a problem where I was like, okay, if you just sit there and mash, like you are going to be in trouble. The enemies have like attacks, they will punish you. Like dodging is an important part of the combat. But also, if you hang back and give too much respect to your opponent, as if you're playing it more of like a Bloodborne or a Dark Souls type game, you're not going to do anywhere near enough damage to like take this enemy down. So it took a little bit of playing, but I found this like perfect hybrid system, I feel, of where like you go in and you use your big flashy moves and you're really aggressive, but you have to still watch what the enemies are doing and like dodge out of the way at the right time. And like there's a lot of like area effects stuff that you have to maneuver around the map to avoid. And it's so cinematic, but I also feel like it's satisfying to play at the same time. Like I never feel like I'm turning my brain off, or I'm just like mashing the same thing over and over again. I feel like I'm always like having like a bit of a dance back and forth with especially the bigger enemies. But then at the same time, like you do just get points where you're just like, I'm doing the flashiest, craziest shit right now. Like I'm pressing like 37 buttons on my controller. I don't know. It clicked. I really like this kind of like hybridy system where it's got a little bit of what I think is interesting from both ends of the spectrum, and it's really fluidly working.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. I really like it, and I think for me, like there's examples that I enjoy kind of on both ends of the combat spectrum that we've established that I love and should become standard to talk about games. For those that aren't aware, it's Souls on the one end, and the other end is Dynasty Warriors, and then in the middle we like meet. But
Yeah.
what I like about this game so much is it does, like you say, have that cadence of like it's your turn to attack, and then you're really watching. Like the enemies have tells. It is like that kind of combat where you can parry, but the parry works by like hitting an attack at the same time instead of a specific button because that button's your dodge. And you can like combo attacks off a well-timed dodge, stuff like that. But what I like about it a lot is like in say let's take Bloodborne for an example, just because we're very familiar. Like a lot of the time you're waiting for a parry and you're passively like kind of waiting for your dodge, whereas in this game you don't have a lot of passive time. You kind of fill that with your combos and your generic attacks while also paying attention to the boss and getting ready to dodge and whatnot. So it's just a lot more active in those moments where you're waiting for the big hits, which I really like. And it's just fun to start using all the powers. They're all so varied, and the animations are just fantastic, and all the way the enemies light on fire. Clive has those kind of fire attacks, and I just think it's just so flowy, like you said. And the other thing too is it's got that arcade element where it gives you rewards, like, oh, you use the lunge attack, okay, you get a star for that, and then you had a well-timed dodge after that into a phoenix burst thing forward, and then you combo it with something else, and you get all these like markers that show up, and it's kind of that dopamine hit that makes you just feel like a badass while you're pulling off like very aesthetically pleasing attacks, but in, like you said, in a way that's well timed, and you feel like you're actually really accomplishing something, because it's not like if you don't play well, like you're not going to die. Like I've died a few times in this game for sure, and it's just like you're going to take hits. It's definitely not something where you're not going to take any damage, like it's not possible to play a lot of RPGs flawlessly, which I think is cool.
Yeah, exactly. And there's that satisfaction too of like, even though it's fast paced, there's a lot going on, there's a satisfaction of like when an enemy uses a move for the first time and you get hit by it because you don't really know the timing or like when you're supposed to dodge or how to anticipate it. But then as the fight goes on, you kind of like realize, you're like, oh, okay, like this I seem like they're gonna do this like big swipe, like it's actually a little bit like more delayed than when I thought I dodged too early before. And then they do the swipe and you dodge, and if you dodge like at the perfect time, you get like a precision attack, kind of like a flurry blow. I think Breath of the Wild did something similar, but like if you dodge at the perfect time, you can follow up with an attack that kind of like blends into a combo. And so I find that's really satisfying, where it's like, okay, like I missed that, but I know how to do it later. And it's really like consistent, like the timings feel good, like they make sense with when like the animation follows up, like it's just really smooth. And the game has run for me like flawlessly so far as well, I have to say. And there's particle effects like going nuts. Like anytime you use a move and there's like fire flying off of stuff, and you've got like your big like fire phoenix wings like spinning in a tornado, and it's just like, I don't think I'll ever get tired of watching it. And it just like runs perfectly, at least on the performance mode that I think we're both using.
I recently switched to graphics, and I was told like the graphics mode has a bit of a more locked frame rate. It's like locked at 30 instead of a bit more variant. So I've tried it out. I haven't really noticed a whole lot of difference. So I think I might just leave it there, because it ends up just looking so beautiful in a lot of the icon scenes and those big like $100,000 cutscenes that happen often. So I think it's maybe time to move into spoilers now, as we continue to talk about combat. So this is the first warning for everyone out there. Just if you don't mind some light spoilers to do with combat, to step out now. But 3, 2, 1. So for as much fun as it is, kind of as you get into the first part of that game, and you're kind of having your two big moves and then doing the rest of your moves and whatnot in between, the game really takes off combat wise once you get the second element of wind, because you all of a sudden have doubled your special move output. You've got another circle ability, which is like your movement thing, and to your benefit, Kate, it's aerial combat a lot using the wind power. So how did you feel about it?
You know what? It's not aerial combat. I've managed to find a loophole, because you see, the two wind moves you start with, like one is that like cool flurry claw move.
I love that move. I think that's my favorite one so far. Like just the scratching. I like
that one a lot too. It's like, I always tell my cat, I'm like, look, that's you. Whenever I do that move. But the other one is an aerial combat, but this game has a skill tree where it's not actually a skill tree. I don't think they like have requirements. You have to get this first, then this, but it has like abilities you can buy and upgrade. And I bought the other wind one, where it's super cool. You like jump backwards, do a dodge, and then lunge forward with an attack. And I think it does more damage if you actually dodge something with it. So I replaced the aerial move with that move. And I don't have to do any aerial combat. I'm planted on the ground and I'm jumping around. It's very cool.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't know if you fought any aerial enemies and used like the Phoenix shift against them, but it like teleports
Yes,
Clive
you do
up
go
into
up.
the air. Like I found that so cool the first time I used it. I did not
Yeah.
expect to be moving up, but yeah, I think those wind
Mhm.
abilities are so fun, and it just becomes like I almost feel like this game is actually a triple blending of games. Like, hear me out. It's not just an action game and an RPG, but it's also kind of like has some elements of RTS, not RTS. What's the
Like an
like an
MMO kind
MMO
of
in it,
style.
because you're managing so many cooldowns. Like I can
Yeah.
just imagine. Obviously now, like we've got wind. Like there's gonna be at least when you look at the circle, right? Like around your skill tree, we're gonna
Yeah.
have like at least I'm imagining 6 elements by the end of the game if there's 6 crystals, right? So like
Hmm.
think of juggling all those moves. Like it's very cerebral. You're constantly like spinning multiple plates, whether it's dodging or comboing or waiting for your cooldowns and thinking of which one to use. I think it's like it's amazing. Like I'd love to play some modern Devil May Cries after playing this.
Yeah, it's almost kind of a little overwhelming. Like I got the controls down and then I got wind and then I immediately was like, how do I swap? How do I do all my moves? And I was like kind of messing up a little bit, but after playing for maybe like 20 minutes, like okay, I'm pretty sure I have this figured out now. But it's really cool because there's no mana, which I also love because mana is an extremely restrictive system, and I think it can be good if you want that restriction for a certain reason, but if not, it's just like, oh, well, I don't want to use my mana moves on this like random wolf enemy because it's not an important enemy. So I'll just not use the cool move and I'll wait,
Mm-hmm.
to optimize it later. Whereas in this, like, no, the cool moves just go on cooldown, and then there is like a skill, I guess, of like knowing when to use them and when to save them. But largely, it's just like, okay, use my cool wind moves, swap to fire, use my fire moves, go back to wind. They're almost off of cooldown now, and then like go back to fire because I want the dash, and then go back to wind because I can pull this guy. And there is like a lot of things that you have to keep in
Yeah.
mind to do. And like I think it's smart that it starts you off relatively simple in terms of your moves and builds up to this, because it would be so overwhelming, I think, to just start with multiple of
Yeah.
the abilities, because you're just constantly like managing in your head like what moves you have available at any given time. But like when you get in a flow of using them, it's super cool.
Yeah, it is like a zen state thing, and like you said, that familiarity,
Mhm.
once you have that 20 minutes, like I'm at the point now where I
Yeah.
definitely know like all the buttons, and I can tab over to like whatever I need next to get there, and I think that's just like amazing to be able to have that, because there's some games where you're kind of thinking about it a lot and it just doesn't always feel intuitive, but for some reason like this is maxed out like every button you can think of on the controller, especially when you think of you're also I love the way that they do the item mapping and switching that around with controlling Torgal as well, because Torgal, of course, is your dog, and you can command him in combat. Like he's actually a party member that sticks with you for the majority of what you do, and it's cool because you can basically push left on the D-pad and it'll switch you between items, so you can like hot swap 3 items in the other directions, or you can click Torgal and you can give him um, 3 different things. I think it's like a regular attack. He can heal a little bit, although I find that to be pretty useless, to be honest. He doesn't really do a lot. And then the other one is like a launch, I think, that puts enemies in the air. I haven't really played around with it too much. I don't know. Honestly, like I think it's cool you can control him, and I'm sure he might get stronger. But I found him to be pretty irrelevant so far, just like in combat anyway. Although I like him as like a character.
I think I mostly just let him kind of do whatever he's
Yeah.
gonna do and then stick with Clive. But I do like Torgal. If anything ever happens to Torgal,
No
like
kidding.
that's how I feel about most of these
Yeah.
characters. I've gotten very invested. If
Yeah.
anything ever happens to Sid, oh my god.
How do you feel about the combat in terms of like when the NPCs are on your team? We've had Sid in quite a few combat scenarios with us, and I can't tell if he's really making much of a difference or if it's more just there for like visual spectacle because his lightning is so damn cool. But I mean,
Yeah, the guys you get at the start, like Wade, that other
the other
guy,
guy who
were
like,
completely useless.
yeah, oh my god,
Tyler and Wade, they were totally useless. They did literally nothing. So that's cool. I do think he makes a bit of a difference, because like especially when there's like a group of enemies, it'll be like you'll kind of be split off from each other, and then I'll be fighting on one side with half the enemies, and then I'll finish my side and then turn around to help, and it's like, oh, there's only one guy left. Like, so Sid clearly is like pulling his weight a little bit, but also he's just cool, and he's like a great companion to have around.
Yeah.
So
Part of me wishes you could like have a little bit of input of how the NPCs will fight, like not like commanding all of them like you do with Torgal, but I wish it was like, you could go into the menu and be like, okay, Sid, you're going to focus on like using your abilities as much as possible, or like crowd control, or like focus on the biggest guy, just something like that. I would have loved a little bit of customization, just because, like I said, I can't always tell if he's making contribution, and at least that way it could maybe deceive you into thinking that he was, if you know what I mean. But that's one of the smaller
but
nitpicks,
I mean, Sid's such a badass. I don't think he's gonna take orders from us. That's my
fair.
lore reason.
That's fair. If
anything, we should be taking orders from Sid. So
that's a good point. Anything else on the mechanics side, or do you want to start digging into the story, or maybe got a few quick hits on my end about like mechanics if we want to finish that up?
Yeah, I think I should have a question for you, actually. Yeah. Do you prefer the wind or the fire so far?
Oh, that's a good question. You
only have one.
Well, actually, to be fair, I haven't actually bought that jump back counter thing like you have with the wind. It looks cool and I want it, but I'm really focusing on like maxing out all the basic skills first, just because they're like so universal. I think I would take fire at this point, and I'll tell you why. It's because I really prefer the Phoenix Shift to the other one. The attacks are kind of... I really like the ranged fireball, actually. I think that's my favorite attack so far. But how about you? How about you?
That is my exact answer, for the exact same reason. I love the Phoenix Shift. The ability, it just kind of like is like a dash that just gets you to enemies. And like there's the thrust you can do with the sword, but I just find the shift is so useful for like navigating around the battlefield and like closing gaps, that like I definitely default to fire for that, and then just swap to wind to use the abilities when they're available, or if I need the pull for like a certain stagger or something. And then otherwise I'm like, okay, back to fire.
Yeah.
Like
the way you can use the wind to pull down the bigger enemies and like stagger them to the ground, that's like a really cool thing. And I think it's awesome because it incentivizes you to, like, each of them have that special ability, right? It's not just the 2 attacks and then like the 1 movement style one. And I think that adding incentives like that will be smart to get everyone to use like all the elements and not just the 2 that they kind of prefer.
Yeah, I like that they're not just kind of flavors that do the same thing, but they are definitely things that like have larger like play style implications. And then also like, it's not just a choice. It's like you really are intended to be using everything at your disposal, not just like, which of these elements do you prefer? I think like maybe when we get more, you'll probably have either 2, maybe 3 that you can have equipped at any time, and you got to choose at that point. But because I can't cycle between 6.
Yeah, me too. I guess that's true. That's true. But still, you'll have like at least 6 abilities, even if you choose 3 elements. So
which is a lot.
Yeah,
which is a lot.
Yeah. Couple quick hits on my end, I guess. Mechanically, they're not really even spoilery actually, too. So I probably should have mentioned this earlier. I assume most people would stick around, but. Small nitpick for me. I wish there was a mini map. I really, really wish there was a mini map, just because, like, not that there's a lot of, big areas to explore. There's some more than others, but one thing about Final Fantasy is there's like oftentimes like little nooks and crannies you can turn the corner and like find a chest, and it takes a long time to do that visually. I love to just get to an area, open the map, and be like, okay, if I take a left up here, there's a dead end, there's going to be a chest there. I don't get to miss any items like that. It's just a really small thing, but I really wish there was. There's also been a couple times where I've actually got turned around during combat and like ran back down the same way. So I would love to see a mini map. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
I think in certain areas there are.
But not like on the HUD. That's what I mean. Like I wish you could toggle it on the HUD. Because having to menu in every time is like, that sucks, right? The other thing is that I just love the menus in general. I feel like you said about the tomes, everything's well organized. You can change the text size, all that stuff. I think it's pretty good for accessibility, at least from what I've heard. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me. But more than that,
they're also very tactile.
That's what I was gonna say. The DualSense. Oh my god, yeah, amazing, right?
Yeah. It just whenever you like go over, whenever you like press the D-pad to go to a different option, or you like use the stick to like slide over something, it just gives you this nice little like tick,
it's
like
so
little
subtle.
tiny little subtle tick. as if you've made it in the menu, and it is yeah,
Yeah.
it's lovely.
And
The
even when
best
like the
other
help
best
text
part of
pops
the
up,
menu.
like it has that nice little like
Mhm.
shimmery kind of feeling in your hands.
Yep, yep, and it makes a little noise out of the controller, like
hmm
it's
You know,
all
the
figured
best
out.
noise is when you use your spells. Like if you use the charged magic shot on the
Yeah.
controller, like that sounds awesome on
Yeah,
there.
certain things coming out of the controller.
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing about the DualSense is certain noise coming out of your controller. When you pet Torgal, he like
hmm
barks out of the controller, which is adorable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's all I got, Kate. I think that's all I got. I'm ready to start talking about the story if you're
Yeah,
interested. Yeah.
I think I am burning as though I
Okay.
have the fire icon within me to talk about this
Okay,
story.
it's time. So, what do you think? Take it away. Where do you want to start? There's so much to talk about. Holy shit.
I didn't expect it to be so sad. It's been very sad so far. Oh my God. Okay. Please don't listen if you even
Yeah.
consider like
Get out
10%
now.
playing this game. Get out now. So that fight at the beginning between uh Ifrit
Mm-hmm. No,
and
it's Bahamut.
the Phoenix. Oh, sorry, Bahamut. Between Bahamut and the Phoenix was super cool and cinematic the first time.
Yeah.
And then the second time, I was like, my jaw was on the floor and I was so upset. And I knew how it ended, but I was like, willing every cell in my
Mm-hmm.
body was like, no, please, it can't end this way.
I know.
Oh my God, what a crazy, crazy twist. The brother who gets passed over by the Phoenix,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, this
you got
is.
your own icon.
Do you
Holy.
remember when I said this game improves on both Bloodborne and Persona 5? Not to be outdone. It improves on Persona 5 because it does the same time loop thing that Persona does, but instead of
Yeah.
doing it 90 hours into the game, which for sure is a cool payoff, it does it like right at the start, which I think is such a
Mm-hmm.
good hook to get people to catapult their way into playing through the rest of the game. Um, anyway, yeah, what a moment. And like, not only was it Joshua, it was also your father,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, mentioned a
The
lot less, but
Chocobo?
the chocobo.
The Chocobo went down too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sad stuff, but you know, I think it's just so compelling, and I think that's one of the reasons that I can see, aside from the obvious kind of fantasy setting where this game's getting compared to Game of Thrones, is like, for me, that made me just think like, holy shit, like if these guys are dead and this is less than 2 hours into the game, again, nobody all of a sudden seems safe from death, and we've seen that again, like since Benedicta, where we just got to, like
Mm-hmm.
she's gone, like people die in this game, and I'm really there for it because it's a pretty big cast, and I love the stakes that it adds when you kill off characters like this right at the beginning.
Yeah, and I have already a lot of questions, a lot of things I'm wondering. Like I think it's and it raises a lot of questions too, like how the icons work, because in theory they're like, there's one for each type, and when one of them dies, like another person's born as the icon. And so you already got this like interesting mystery off the start of like there's a second fire icon, like that's not supposed to happen. Where does that come from, and like
hmm
how does that fit into the place of the world? And then you have that scene where you get to play as Joshua, which is really cool. And
That blew me
he
away
plays
when we
quite,
first did that. I was like, oh
yeah,
my god, multiple playable characters, like he's a mage, like this is fucking cool.
yeah, and he plays very differently. Like he's got his buttons are different, like magic spells instead of any kind of melee combat. And then, I don't know if we'll get to play as Joshua again. But I have a theory actually that Joshua might like come back
Uh-huh.
because he was the
Yeah.
Phoenix after
Well,
all.
we'll have to
Um,
next episode we might know the answer. You never know.
yeah, but I think that's such an interesting story hook too because
hmm
you meet Clive first 13 years after the event, and he's just hell bent. Like his only purpose is revenge. Like he doesn't know who he is. He's lost his family. He's lost his place in the world. He's ostracized by everyone he knows as a branded who's like less than human. All he can really do is serve in someone else's war. And so his only like purpose in life is revenge. But you as the player know that he is the one that killed Joshua. And that hooded figure is definitely mysterious and maybe involved to a degree.
hmm
But like you know what you did and Clive
Yeah.
doesn't. And that's like it's lingering over the whole rest of the game until Clive eventually learns the truth. And so it's this odds of like, you're so invested in like following Clive's story and accomplishing his goal, but you're also so concerned. Like, don't go down this hole, man. Like, this is a bad
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, 100%. And like
um,
he's so motivated by that, though. Like it's interesting to see Sid trying to
mhm.
talk him out of it and being like, it's not worth it, all that kind of stuff. What did you think of some of the other characters? Like we haven't talked about Jill yet. I thought Jill is kind of an interesting one. And again, through the active time lore, you learn like, oh, I learned that she's kind of the ward of the kingdom before I even knew that in the story. But have you seen her? You haven't, right? Since
Well, you see her, you fight her
as Shiva, that's
originally
right.
as Shiva
Yeah.
before realizing that it's Jill, and now
Hmm.
she's back at the hideaway, getting like attended to medically. So that I think will be good. That's like the one family that Clive has left.
Yeah.
So I think she's gonna end up being a pretty important character. But yeah, I don't know what Clive is gonna do from here on out. The hooded figure is certainly mysterious and interesting. And then there's all the fact that, like, why can Clive have multiple elements? Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem like it's a thing, and he's special in some way. He's having weird visions. There's a lot of pieces going on, and then we have like a new warring couple with warring factions of like
Hmm.
big leaders and like political stuff going on that seems like very out of the realm of what Clive is doing, but I'm sure is going to play into, maybe you take a side, maybe you have to deal with the consequences of the war to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I found that really interesting when there was that cut, like after you kind of fight Benedicta and all that stuff. It cuts away from that scene like you're talking about, and there's this totally different war taking place between like two different nations, and you see two more of the icons you haven't seen before. And I guess it's just like trying to give you a preview like of what's going on around the rest of the kingdom, because it's kind of building that world in a way where like Clive isn't there, but they want the player to know like this is not a not
Uh,
an exclusive event going on in this one area where Clive is. So I like that, and it's kind of wetting our whistle for who we might see in the future. I guess that one guy that turns into the dragon, the prince or whatever, he was really cool. I like him a lot.
I like him. He's kind of a very like religious nation is
Mm-hmm.
the kind of vibe I'm getting from him. He's really funny though. I like him. I want to see what his character does, but he was cracking me up because he was like, okay, I'm gonna join the fight like very like prim proper. Like this is my responsibility. Like I'm not gonna take an interest in killing, but it's what I must do. And so he walks out and his like steward hands him his like he's got like a big cool spear, and he's like wonderful. He grabs his spear and then turns into a dragon. Like, why did you need your
Yeah.
spear? And then he like finishes being a dragon. He lands. He's holding the spear and he gives it back to his steward. Like, oh, it's a good thing.
I didn't even
Good
pick
thing
up
you
on
have
that.
that, man.
I didn't even pick up on that. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
Uh,
it made me laugh. Like, I don't know, maybe in case you turn back, but it just seemed like they had this whole like perfect setup. It was like, no, dragon time.
that's amazing. Oh man,
Yeah.
I found a lot of the stuff is just really over the top in this game. Like it just escalates and escalates on this scale that I don't even know if there's a game that really compares to some of the scale of the things we've seen. Like they're flying through like portals, it seems like, and there's these giant, massive, like burning areas that are just getting crushed, and people jump in out of nowhere. Like there's that fight going on, and then Sid like descends like Thor covered in lightning. It's almost like a superhero movie in certain senses. Like everyone's powering up, and the moment I wanted to talk about too, speaking of Persona, the moment when Clive is like getting crushed by Garuda in that fight, that first kind of big boss fight, and then he's just like, no, and then he's like awaken, and it's like I had like so many chills. I was like, that is just the same as when Joker meets who's his face for the first time in that dungeon. I was like, there's no
Yeah.
way that's not a Persona reference. Come on, like there's no way. I love it.
Yeah, it was so cool. And I guess that's a good leading point. Like the last big thing we did was Benedicta fight, and it's a really crazy fun fight just being regular Clive. I thought it was awesome. Like she's big, like she's super fun. She's got a lot of really cool moves. There's all like the
Yeah.
cinematic sequences you go into when you get her down to like certain thresholds of health that play out. And then you're like, I beat her, and it pops up like Garuda slain, and you're like, woo, look at me, I did it. And then she's like, oh no, let's fight a second time. She comes back and like claws you, and then you have to be Bahamut. That's the
Yeah,
correct one,
Bahamut,
right? I want
Bahamut.
to say Ifrit, but it's
Yeah.
Bahamut. And I found that to be like a really cool fight too, which I was not expecting to get to
Mm.
play. And I think like mechanically it's less interesting than just being regular Clive, but the weight behind the moves when you're in that massive like bipedal dragon form, like it really felt quite heavy, everything that he did. And it's so cinematic, like he's just like slamming her around. It's like a massive kaiju fight
Yeah.
that you are getting to play. And it's like we're 10 hours in, like that would be the finale of another game,
That's a
right?
really
Like
good trope.
that would be like we blew the budget on this crazy finale. You were this big dragon form, and like you have to fight the final boss. But this is like 10 hours in, just like weird Benedicta.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like
Yeah,
I wouldn't have been surprised if Benedicta was like one of the like the second to final boss in the game. You like take her down and then meet the real evil. But
yeah.
instead she just like dies.
I'm not 100% convinced that she's
Yeah.
dead.
Well.
I think
Yeah.
like she could be, but
Sure.
I don't know if that's the last we'll
Yeah.
see of her.
I mean, either way, like I love that fake out as well. I think that was really cool, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
another unexpected thing. Like this game just keeps pulling the rug out from under you, in terms of what you expect. Like there's just twists and turns, and I've played a little bit beyond what we've talked about here today, and it continues that way. But icon fights, that's what you were mentioning. Is like I agree with you. Like they're not very mechanically interesting, despite having that weight. I think what really saves them is the production value is just through the roof, right? Like it's so cinematic and beautiful to watch and to feel, and everything about it. Like the musical score is just ridiculous, and it almost like
Mm-hmm.
saves it being from being uninteresting to play in those moments, because I feel like a lot of other games, if it wasn't to this high tier and every other standard, we'd be like, oh, this is a waste, like it's padding, but
Yeah.
when it's done to this quality, I'm here for it.
Yeah, how I kind of see it is I basically see it like it's just a big cutscene, like a big
Hmm.
cool kaiju fight cutscene that they're like, here, also play a little
Yeah.
bit. And I think like, if it was like a larger portion of the game, I think it might get boring, but because it's like just like a novelty that you do after you do the main fight, which is mechanically very fun to play, I think it actually works well because it's like that could just be like a cutscene afterwards, but instead like you have a little bit of like control over it. And yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm on board.
Same.
I think they're going to be like kind of few and far between. They're going to be like their big set piece moments. At least my assumption. Who knows? You could just do that every 5 minutes because this game's insane and doesn't want to slow down.
Yeah, true. Well, it's like the same as the active time cinematics, or like the cinematic dodge and whatever. It's just an excuse for you to not be totally uninterested during the cutscene. And I don't know how you could be uninterested, but I guess there's people out there like that. But yeah, I'm so excited to play more of this game. We didn't talk a lot about the hideaway and kind of Sid's little troop, and I guess we should touch briefly on like the themes around the game too. Like it's very clearly talking about like discrimination and whatnot, and making a lot of like allegory, or what's it called, analogies to like real world discrimination practices and like bias in society, but they're using the world of Final Fantasy to tell it. And I think they, my impression is that it's quite heavy-handed in a lot of parts. Like they definitely don't make it very subtle in a lot of what it's saying, but I think at the same time it's like I commend it for not being afraid to have that kind of messaging, especially in such a large game that a lot of times I feel like would get kind of like, oh, we shouldn't put that in because it'll, it's silencing towards, we don't.
Or you get them and they do put it in. They're like, this is the motivation, and the characters like never talk about it.
Yeah.
And then there's things that like kind of like contradict the vibe, because it's like the gameplay came first and then we just kind of threw in this as like a theme.
Sure.
And then,
I mean, this game, the one thing
happening.
is though, is there's like no characters of color in this game whatsoever, and so despite all that it's saying, it's like that's like a huge problem as well. Like I don't think it should take away from the messaging that they are putting in, but it's like by no means is it perfect. Like the representation in this game is the worst that you probably could ever find. And
and every single actor is just like a British person. I don't know. Like I don't know if that's like, I'm assuming that's not even like a Final Fantasy set standard, because
no, it's
one
not.
of the like 4 Final Fantasy characters I know is Barrett.
Yeah, no, it's not a standard at all. And like, I've seen some people saying, well, it's, it takes place in olden times and like an English setting, like there wouldn't have been diversity, but like that's a stupid argument because it's Final Fantasy and there's chocobos and dragons and icons and magic and like you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like this really doesn't feel like a stand-in for like
No.
typical like this isn't like medieval, but they've added magic. Like this really feels like completely its own world that like yeah, sure you can draw some like comparisons, but it doesn't feel at all like it's meant to be on Earth.
Hmm.
So I agree. I think that's just kind of like a weird head scratch of like there's really no
Yeah.
reason that couldn't have been included, but
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, it's really interesting to me, like getting back to the game about the bearers, like we kind of alluded to earlier, in the terms of like, they're the ones that can use magic without a crystal. You see a lot of people around the town, like, watering plants with a crystal or whatever. Like, it's really cool, actually. But the bearers,
Mhm.
despite being the ones that actually have that power, are the ones who are like discriminated against, and kind of just used as tools for those in the kingdom to use in like these combat situations. Basically, it's really it's an interesting wrinkle to the society in the game.
Yeah, and it's definitely compelling. It's definitely something that gets you on Sid's side because his character so far, at least his motivation, is that he wants to essentially build a world where like it doesn't. I think he has a direct line that's like, I want to build a world where it doesn't matter like what you are, it matters who you are, and like. I mean, that's just a universally like amazing message, and
Yeah.
so I'm 100% on board with whatever Sid wants to do now. But yeah, it's kind of neat. It's an interesting flavor. Um, it kind of makes sense of the idea of like, people are scared of, there's probably a bit of fear on one side, but also like just misunderstanding and like, probably a lot of like fear mongering and paranoia and like it's very interesting to see. But then the bears are like so pivotal and important, like the kingdom would fall apart without them.
Yeah.
So this weird dichotomy of them being like second class citizens, but also like, exploited to such an extreme extent. It's I'm interested to see where it goes because I think the king, at least from what the small portion we've seen of him, I really hope he's not just an evil dude and there's nothing else to it, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I really love the hideaway. Just I didn't quite catch it. Now, can you fill me in on this? Is the hideaway a crashed airship, or
Oh,
because I couldn't quite tell that? And there was one scene earlier on, kind of like around when you first meet it, where they mention like, oh, it's an airship or something like that, and I didn't quite catch if that was the hideaway or not.
interesting. I don't
Because it's
know.
kind of
I
this
thought it was
weird.
like a ruin.
It's like this weird ruin, right? But I was like, is it the ruin of an
Yeah.
airship or not? Like I couldn't tell.
Oh,
And the
that
reason I
would
was
be
thinking
interesting.
that,
I
right,
just,
is
yeah.
like Sid is oftentimes the airship pilot and like in his game. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that would be a nice homage of like the ruin that he lived in was an airship that had crashed. Like that
Mm-hmm.
would be really cool in the lore for me. But
That
I
would be a
wasn't
cute
sure.
detail.
So and the other thing too, like, is that, are we gonna get an airship in this game? That's one of my questions, because I don't exactly know what you would use it for. There's no open world traversal, like you just kind of go to the nodes on the map, and it's awesome. You can just jump around wherever you want to go. But I mean, give me the airship. I want to fly around. How's it gonna work?
Yeah, I don't see us really getting something like that. Like there is fast travel points too, but at this point I
Mm,
don't really see why you need to use them even like
yeah,
unless you're going back to areas you've previously like gone
yeah.
through.
I
But
mean, I get the impression there's gonna be a few bigger maps. Like I said, I played a little bit beyond where we are, and there is one that's like kind of large that I went to. So I think there's gonna be maybe a bit more size, but yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me either. It's kind of weird. Kind of weird. We got to talk about Goats before we leave. Goats is the goat. Everybody.
the
Uh,
best character
Big
in the
chair on
game.
his back. He carries around sick people and people that need help. I mean, he is the most. He's the best side character you could possibly ask for.
The funny part about Goats is the only person we've seen ride on his chair. Like he shows up with Sid when you rescue Jill from her captors, because that's another kind of point too, is like the bearers are just against, but the actual like dominants that hold the
Mm,
icons are like even worse. Like she is like a full-on prisoner
yeah,
who just gets like in chains carted around to where she needs to blow things up
yeah, and
basically.
she's
Like she's
blackmailed
just
towards like, hey, help us, or we're gonna kill your
yeah,
like family, basically.
she's basically just like a nuclear weapon that they keep in the basement locked up until they decide that they need her for something,
Hmm.
which is horrible, but also very interesting because they're very dangerous, these icons, and they don't always seem to have like full control. Like they can use them to a degree, but if you want like the full extent of their power, they completely like lose
It's like
control.
you get possessed by them in a way, you know. Like I thought it's so cool that they can. I looked this up in the real time lore thing. They can prime, right, which is like going halfway when Sid gets his lightning, but he's still clearly Sid. And then later on, he does his transformation into like the full
Into
Rama.
Gandalf,
Like
yeah.
Gandalf. Yeah, I like that name more. But it was so cool to see. I was wondering like, oh, who is his icon gonna be? And to my knowledge, Rama is actually a pretty like niche lightning one, or hasn't been in the game for a while, so it's cool that they're like pulling out some interesting ones. Like Ifrit's not in the game either as of yet, and that's like the classic fire one, so I appreciate that too.
Yeah, so it's kind of neat to change that, especially that too, because they kind of like teased his for a bit too. So like, who is it? But yeah, so they have those going on, and I originally had a point, and I'm just thinking of Sid as Gandalf.
Yeah, well, they're unreliable, right? Like you can't fully control the icon, or at least it seems like if you're new to it, you can't. I get the impression that Sid and Benedicta were a little bit more adept at like controlling their power than.
Yeah, Sid seems so. Benedicta, I don't. She's good at doing the like 80%, but when she went full on at the end, I think it was like just she was in a lot of grief.
That's what I attributed it to, like the grief, but.
Oh, goats. Anyway, this is what we're getting to. So goats shows up, you're saving Jill, you put Jill on Goats' back, she's injured, and off they go. But Jill wasn't originally there. Like, I don't know if they were like intending to come get her, so maybe that's why he brought the chair. But I like to think of it in the sense of like Sid was just riding on Goats. Like, because it was just the two of them. So like Goats just walking on Sid on his back, and then we picked up Jill, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I guess she's injured. Goats, you better carry her this time." Wow. I like the imagery of like Sid normally just rides around on Goats. Like he doesn't own a chocobo like everyone else. He's just got like a big guy with a chair.
My theory was that like Goats was the walking ambulance for the crew, you know, like they brought the chair because they anticipated like someone was gonna be hurt. But I like your theory a lot more.
It can be both, right? Yeah. So it's like the chair's always empty on the way in. I might as well.
That's awesome. What a better way to leave the podcast for now, I guess. So I think that's all for Final Fantasy XVI for our first impressions. To summarize, this game is fucking awesome, and we're both going to play a lot more and hopefully talk about the next section up until we get the next element and icon sort of wrapped up for next time. But you can check in with us then. For now, we're going to take a very rare and infrequent musical interlude break and come back with our earlier recorded segment on the Nintendo Direct. So don't go anywhere. Thanks for listening. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second part of the show for the second time because I didn't click record on our first session. So we're going to go right back into our recap of the Nintendo Direct. As you heard back on the first section of the show, it's been a while since we've done one with an actual like division between segments, but you had some music in there today, so that was nice, I'm sure. Who knows what song it was, but I'm sure it was great. But anyway, yeah, we're here to recap the Nintendo Direct. But before we do, Kate, we want to incorporate our listener mail question for the week right in here because it's very applicable to the Nintendo Direct. Some may say it's necessary to have seen the Direct to answer the question, which I'll let you read out now.
I'm gonna read it out. You got to fill in the context for yourself. So actually, this is a very applicable question to any aspect of your life. And that is going to be, which was the winner? Which was the loser? And which are you most intrigued by, for good or bad reasons? So, that could be applied to your friends and family. It could be applied to your, vacation plans. Like, whatever you want to apply this question to, it works. But today, it's all about the direct.
That's right. So thank you, Ryan, for the question. And if you want to be cool like Ryan and write in a question for a future episode, you can do so as well to CloudControlPod at proton.me, or write us a question or comment on wherever you're watching the show. We'll get to it on a future episode. So thank you very much to all of you who write in. And with that, I guess we'll just dive right back into the first few games, which we have already talked about. But you know what? That's fine. It was a warm-up, and now we know exactly what we want to say. About the Pokemon DLC, I mean, we watched some of this video going through. I think we kind of settled on the fact that it's kind of cool that they do this, but it would be nice, like, to kind of, maybe this was something that was the efforts were included to make the regular game a little bit more complete in some of its errors and all that, instead of kind of developing DLC in the background and not devoting fully to that main product.
Yeah, it just feels a little bad faith in terms of, the main game was a little bit lacking by a lot of people's standards. And then not only has there been one DLC, this is now a second big DLC pack. Whereas, other companies put out free DLCs, and it's just, a look that, is not overly favorable on Pokemon a lot of the time. But that being said, the DLC does look pretty cool. We agreed we really like the night market kind of like atmosphere, and the outfits are cool, and hopefully you can wear the outfits on more than just the gym battles like in Sword and Shield, because that was a bummer. Do you know how much money I spent on like the ghost trainer outfit just to find out I couldn't wear it?
That's pretty lame. In the new game, you can only like choose 3 base outfits, and there's not really any customization, so they took that away completely because you're a student. So I mean, you win some, you lose some.
Just let us play as like an old man one time.
That would be
I know
awesome,
that's
right?
One of the complaints. Like why
a
do
Pokemon
we have to be
veteran.
Like, yeah, like I just want to be like one of those old, like rich, snooty men that owns one Growlithe.
Choose your NPC archetype. I'll go through as a juggler. I'll just switch every third turn for no reason.
Exactly. Like, come on, Pokemon, give us some real meaty choices.
Oh my god. Okay, so next after that was Sonic Superstars, and it was kind of cool to see Sonic pop up. A lot of people thought it was going to be Mania if it was a 2D Sonic, but this really looked like kind of Sonic in the new Super Mario Bros. Era, where it's like a 4-person co-op kind of style, and I think it looks pretty cool for people that that are big 2D Sonic fans. Like, this is probably something that I hope they're interested in, because I think it's a unique take.
Yeah, and I always have the opinion of like games like this, like if you can play multiplayer, it's just more fun. Like, you still have the option to play like single player if you care about getting like high scores and like speed running levels and stuff. Like, am I gonna play Sonic on my own? Probably, as not a huge Sonic fan, probably not. Would I play it on the couch with 3 friends and call Knuckles if I had the option? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like the Ninja Turtles game, right? That's exactly what I would envision from this. Like, I wouldn't really, play it outside of that context, but for that context, for that evening or two that you need to beat it, like, it's a lot of fun. And I think that would be exactly the same for this. Look at that alligator. It was huge. Wow. Okay, after Sonic, we're into the last one we already talked about, which is Palia. And, free-to-play open world farming. There's some hunting in there. It's got, hopefully, there's some merits in there, but it just gets drowned out in the vast swath of these style of games that we seem to see largely in the Nintendo Directs.
Yeah, exactly. They always seem to be in the Nintendo Direct too. I think maybe because it's a lot of smaller like indie developers that tend to be making these games. But I mean, as far as they go, this one looks interesting. I like that it's co-op. You can run around with Taylor and who was it? Like it was Rob
Ben.
earlier.
It was Ben, I think, or John. Oh, Jay is Jay and Javi.
Jay, there's Jay. Yeah. So like that definitely makes this kind of game more appealing. Like, man, where do I fit in the hours in my week to do all the farming?
I know. It's a tough. Imagine if you were a big fan of these games. Like, imagine all the work you'd have to do. You're playing 2 or 3 of these at once. Like, sometimes I'm playing 2 or 3 RPGs at once, and I'm like going through some stories. If you're big into these style of games, you're like farming 2 or 3 farm patches a day. Like, that's a lot of work, man. Like, you deserve some kudos. Honestly,
I'd have to quit my job if I was gonna play like more than 2 at a time. Like, I would just be so stressed out. Like, I got stressed out and had to stop playing Animal Crossing Pocket Camp because it was like, sign in every day, otherwise your villagers will hate you, and you've got to do these things, and like, oh, if you miss a day, you lost your bonus. And that stressed me out. I had to quit playing because I was getting like anxious about playing again. So I couldn't imagine playing a few of these like farming
No,
games
fair
where I'm
enough. I
sure
get
there's
you.
like
They're
crops you have to attend daily.
yeah, and they're supposed to be like cutesy and relaxing, but there's a certain level of
Yeah.
stress that comes along with it too. If you're someone that comprehends it that way, and I can totally get you on
Yeah,
that.
they do not relax me. They stress me out.
Yeah.
They feel like tasks that I have to do. Yeah, so.
Okay. Well, speaking of tasks you have to do, maybe we can. It's kind of like the word tactics, right? Like Tactica. We saw Persona 5 Tactica again. Obviously, we've seen this game before at an earlier showcase, but glad it's coming back. And I think it's going to be like, wow, if this wasn't coming to Game Pass, let me preface, I think I would buy this one on the Switch because of the style of game that it was, if it wasn't free on Game Pass.
100% agree. I love tactics games on Switch. They're just like the comfiest way to play it, and like it's so great. And like it's like your buddies like playing some other game on the TV, so you're sitting with your Switch and doing your own thing. This game, I will say, I'm doing a little bit of a cheating loophole. This would be my winner
Yeah.
of the showcase, but we already saw a trailer for it at the Xbox showcase.
Okay.
So it wasn't a new reveal for me, and so I've loopholed that until like I can give the award to a different game, even though 100% like Persona 5 Tactica is a game that I am going to be playing like on release.
Oh yeah. You know what's so funny
But,
about you saying that is I did exactly the same thing for my list. I was like, this is not a first reveal. This is something we've seen before. It's a rerun of something that I'm really happy to see. But yeah, it wasn't my winner for that reason. I couldn't be intrigued. Well, I was, I already know it's there, so it's one of those things. But yeah, this looks fantastic, and I love the mechanic of like when you have the three characters, you put them in a triangle, and then like that area is like the all-out attack range. It just makes so much sense. Oh my god. Excited.
Yeah, it looks like they've translated Persona really well into this style of game, which makes sense. It's already turn-based. It's already like kind of like a tactical RPG, but it looks like they've really like taken a lot of what worked in the original format and fit it into something like this. So I really hope that the characters are like of the same kind of quality as Royal, and I think as long as that's the case, it's going to be a fantastic game.
Yeah. Oh, the powers will just translate so well into different moves on a grid. Like you could just see it, different summons, and they have like different attacks, different properties, and all that. Oh man, cool stuff. Okay, next up was Myth Forest. This is based off of Saturday morning cartoons, and I appreciate that vibe that they're going for. I don't know if they nailed it for me, and I considered maybe putting this one as my loser, but I don't know. It still has something that might redeem it. I can't quite put it in that category, but I don't know. What did you think of Myth Force?
I think like I really like the art. I think it's cute. I think it did well. I think it's kind of like that like He-Man sort of art.
Yeah.
So like maybe not like specifically our favorite cartoons, but it's got that maybe slightly like older like He-Man type is what I always kept thinking back to, especially with some of the
like original Spider-Man kind of look, original like older Scooby-Doo kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly, but I mean, I think it looks fun. I think it's one of those games where like I get like a kind of like a Castle Crashers kind of vibe from it, where I feel like it doesn't look like it's got tons of depth or that like mechanically it looks that interesting, but I think it just looks like a game that's really pleasant to watch play out and would be really fun sitting with some friends. And like I get the impression maybe just not the trailer is not funny, but I get the impression because of the cartoon style that there's going to be a lot of jokes and like humor, and it just like something really fun as a co-op experience.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of like into this one in a weird way.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
The thing that I like most about it is it has like the 4 different classes. Like you have the archer and the knight and the rogue and whatever. Like it's not like you're just like Castle Crashers. You're all the same kind of knight, and then you have like the one different spell. But these are all just. It's almost like a Borderlands take where everyone would have a different character.
What's funny is it was a side tangent about the Castle Crashers all being the same. Is I played with 2 other friends, so we had 3 people, and there are 3 different stats in the game. There's like your magic, your melee, and then there's like speed.
Oh, you don't want to go for speed.
We were going for speed, but we all were like, we're going to specialize. So I was our speed person, and I just did like no damage because like nothing scales with speed. I was just so I could just run around like an
Yeah.
idiot. And so my character is objectively just super shitty. But whenever we had to do a section where we would like run to the other side, I'd get there before everyone else, be like, "Come on, losers, you're so slow," and then do
Man,
no damage and not be helpful.
I've beaten Castle Crashers so many times, and I don't think anyone I've ever played with has went for speed whatsoever. And it's just the way that it is.
It's bad, but it was fun.
All right, everyone, it's time for the Splatfest. We need to get something trending. Anyone that watches this show, hashtag Team Mint Chip, okay? Mint Chip has to win the Splatfest. It's still live right now. I won't be participating, but nor do I really care that much, but it has to win.
Agreed. I'm also not participating, nor do I care, but I'm going to be so upset if I find out that Mint Chip doesn't win.
What are the answers? Like, vanilla, strawberry, mint chip. I mean, I would go mint chip, vanilla, strawberry, in last place myself.
Absolutely. I think vanilla is like a fair contender and doesn't get the respect it deserves, but it's no mint chip, guys. Come on. It's mint chip. So
it's the easiest call in my life. What I will say is these three colors combine very nicely on the Splatoon battlefield aesthetically.
Yeah, I feel like they were chosen kind of intentionally. Like maybe chocolate was considered at one point, and they're like, it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
You know, get strawberry in there instead.
That's true. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Detective Pikachu is returning, everybody. I don't know if we knew about this or not. I've always been intrigued to try Detective Pikachu because, like, you never really get narrative Pokemon games ever, and this is like as far as I can think.
Before the black and white fans are like, "Hey, that story was actually super good."
Fine. Fair enough, but you know what I mean.
But yeah,
this is very unique in terms of Pokemon spin-offs in that way, and I've always wanted to try that original. I think it was on 3DS, right? And
it was. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if I can get that game on the cheap, I'll try the original one and then potentially be excited for this. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I don't know anyone who actually played it, so I've never talked to anyone about their experience with this game. And I just feel like I heard about Detective Pikachu, and then like never saw anything about it ever again online, aside from the movie, which
the movie was fantastic.
Exactly, but I just mean about the game. Like the game came out and just was like, you know, like it never existed in the first place. But I like the movie. I love the world of Detective Pikachu. I think it's honestly more interesting than in the other worlds where there's like, you know, Pokemon in the towns and like fire Pokemon are helping like cook it, like outdoor food stalls, and like various other ones work at cafes, and like the cafes are all named after like different Pokemon, and Pikachu's got a coffee addiction, and it's just a fun world that feels a little bit more like cohesive, I guess.
Yeah. You know what I like about it is you get to see, like you mentioned with the Pokemon doing different things in town, is you get to see them in context other than battle, because that's like 90% of how we see these things is like in stationary pictures on a card or in battle. But it's like, of course they would help put out fires, or like, I wonder who works at the power plant, just like stuff like that, you know, like different ways that they're integrated into like the town, and the movie did that so well. So I'd love to see like more of those fun applications of like what they do for work. Remember like Loudred that was like in the concert and like being the speakers? Like that was so cool to me.
Yeah, it's so cool. So many Pokemon have really creative designs that can be, you know, utilized in different ways like this. And like I'm kind of into it. I feel like this is the kind of game where it's either like low-key amazing or it's just kind of like a shitty game that you can only really enjoy if you're 6.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I really enjoy visual novels, you know, as like as a spin-off to Pokemon, this should really be like potentially our favorite one.
Yeah. You know what? We should find the first game and play through.
Yeah, it's probably like $800 on eBay because it's a Pokemon game.
We will by no means steal it on the internet to play it. But we should both make like an agreement that we're going to detect some Pikachus, or rather we're going to be Pikachu detecting other things.
Okay. We'll circle back to this at a later podcast. And for now, let's go ahead to Super Mario RPG, which I am really thrilled to see here. There's always the rumors of those, you know, older RPGs getting brought back. And I'm not going to play this one because it looks like quite a one-to-one remake of the original, but I played the original a few years ago. I think it was one of the very earliest episodes of Circles and Squares, our original podcast. And I think this game is awesome, and people that haven't played it before, like, this is a great RPG.
Yeah, this is definitely a game that's been on my radar to play for a while. Like, I think all the characters seem really fun. I think the world seems neat. I love Action Commands. I know this is kind of a precursor of Paper Mario, which is
It's very
maybe
similar.
my
Very, very
favorite Mario.
similar. Yeah.
Maybe not now that Odyssey and like Super Mario 64, but other than that, like they're my favorite Mario franchises. Like I know Gino's supposed to be a big deal. Everyone wanted him in Smash Bros.
Man,
Yeah, I'm great
yeah.
to play this.
People are gonna see after they play. My hot take is after this game, people will see that Gino is cool. He's nowhere near like as cool as some of the other characters that got in Smash. I think personally, he's just kind of like a neat side character. But I would take like Bombette over him. Give some Paper Mario in there.
Put Sushi in.
Put Sushi. Come on, where's my girl Sushi? Come on.
She's the best babysitter you've ever seen.
My God.
She will watch your kids and then kick your ass.
Yeah. This is an example of a game that if Nintendo had like a second price tier of like, it's a remake and we're going to like, 20% cheaper than a full price one, like maybe I would get it. But it's just like that Nintendo price we always talk about for a game I've already played, even though it's a nice remake and stuff. It's just like you can't play everything.
Thing, like I'm kind of waiting to see, and I'm assuming there aren't, but I'm waiting to see if there's anything other than like just visual updates to the game that maybe would encourage me to play it. The thing about this kind of stuff is like because it's turn-based, like it's not like it's gonna feel bad to control, right? Whereas like some other games, like you really update the way the game feels, and so it's like it's nicer to play. But this is just it looks different, and I think Super Nintendo stuff looks good. Like it's not like old N64 stuff with like the first 3D polygons that look terrible now. Like this game looks great always, so it just looks better now or in a different style depending on your preference. And so like I could just play the original and probably it's the same game, but also like it'd be nice to buy this one.
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, 100%. It's just so tempting when the old one. The old one's like free on emulator. So
exactly. Yeah. Nintendo, I'll give you $25 and I'll play Super Mario RPG.
Yeah. So the funny thing, I'm trying to watch this just because like this game, one thing it has is like it does have some sort of platforming-esque sections on the overworld, and like in some of these clips you can kind of see. I can't tell if he's running in like multiple directions because the original you have to run in like the 8 ways that the D-pad could go, right, on the SNES. So I don't know if that would be changed.
He looks like maybe he was swimming in all directions, but it's hard to tell just based off of the tiny little snippets.
Yeah. We'll leave that to like Min-Max or whatever on YouTube. They'll figure it out. There's a Princess Peach game coming, which is pretty cool. We didn't really get to see anything about it, but you know what? There needs to be more games with more of Nintendo's characters that aren't, the main few that seem to get the iterative franchises. So I know Peach has had a few in the past, but it'd be cool to see her get, some really cool game like where she can actually be the star and people will recognize it as like, a top kind of echelon Nintendo game. I think that would be great.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this trailer. Like, there's a part of me that's like, this is the loser of the show. And it's not because I think the game looks bad. I like the idea of having a Peach game. I think it could be really cool. But they basically were like, there's the Princess Peach game. This is her changing her dress. That's the whole trailer. And we have nothing else to show you. And so just in terms of like why, like just in terms of the trailer and what was shown, we were shown essentially nothing. And like that's disappointing because I think like if you're gonna bring out Princess Peach and be like, we have this new Princess Peach game and we want her to kind of like be able to be celebrated as a character in the same vein as Mario, you have to show a little more than just, here's her and she spun around. Like,
that's fair.
I just think it just seems like it was such a what's the word for when like you're starting to build something?
Like it's really abrupt. It's really abrupt.
Yeah, it's just like a really like disappointing abrupt. Like, okay, that's it. We'll show you more later, maybe.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess in these showcases you need to have sort of a breadth of like when is everything coming out. Like, but I know what you mean. Like, it's kind of why tease something at all if you can't show us a little bit like something about the game beyond. I guess she's going to be changing her dress like in the movie or whatever, but. I mean, that's obviously a different power for her, I guess, if you want to go off the movie, which is kind of a hint. But, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to see more. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. So is that your loser? I want to make it known.
I don't know. I'm kind of looking for the rest of the list. And, like, I don't really want to call anything a loser. Like, I don't think there are any, like, bad games shown. So this is my loser just in terms of, like, give Peach more. Like, don't be like, we have a Peach game, but also like, whatever. Here's the other Mario guys instead. Show us the cool Peach game if you're proud of making a cool Peach game.
Fair enough. I agree. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was next. This is a game I've played before. Actually, it wasn't. We didn't see anything, right? They just announced they're doing a remake of Dark Moon, which is the 3DS Luigi's Mansion. So when I went to Peru, I played this game on the plane. This was like my travel game, and I have like really fond memories of playing it in that context. I really enjoyed Luigi's Mansion. You know, like it was something I'd never played before, and it made me interested in playing the newest one eventually on the Switch.
I love Luigi's Mansion. Like, it's supposed to genuinely be fantastic. I like the vibe of it. I think Luigi being terrified of ghosts and having to ghost hunt is a really cute idea. Yeah, I think that's cool. Yeah. And like, probably a lot of people didn't play the 3DS game, so it's cool it's coming to Switch.
Yeah, I think like outside of maybe you could argue Metroid, like Nintendo doesn't really do horror. This is sort of Nintendo's take on a haunted house for what it's worth, and it's like it's obviously not a scary game. But there's a few in there where you kind of jump and like Luigi jumps and there's something comes around the corner. Like it does have a few of those moments and you're trying to suck the ghost up the vacuum. It's such a fun mechanic to play around with too. Really cool ideas in that game for sure. I'm excited to see if they add anything to it or just kind of translate it. This could be a game. Now, Batman Arkham is a trilogy that has some hits, some misses, I would say. But it's genuinely like really loved by people and it just seems to always be coming out. It's kind of approaching like Skyrim territory for me at this point, you know? Like these just seem to come to everything.
Yeah, we have a Deathloop award we give out. Should we have like a GTA / like Skyrim award we give out of like somehow this game is getting released again and again and again? And
I think we might have to.
Like, the Arkham games like may be the one thing that's kind of like, you know, getting into that territory.
Like it's just all I can think of. I'm surprised this isn't already on the Switch, you know? Like maybe they're already on individually, but now they're selling the pack. I'm not too sure. Like it's got all the DLC in this pack as well. So it's a great package, but I'm just like, number one, it's kind of like when we talked about Rogue Legacy 2, like how is it not on the PS4 or PS5? Like how is Arkham Trilogy not on the Switch? Like I just thought it was. So yeah. But it's, great package though. All the DLC, like there's a lot of games in there if you're a Batman fan, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Gloomhaven. Kate, take it away.
Yeah, it's Gloomhaven. Okay, everyone play Gloomhaven. It's the best board game ever made. It's so cool that you can play it online now. I mean, it's not as good as sitting around the table with your buddies, obviously. But if this is the only way you can play it, play it. I was having a laugh at this trailer though. I watched it with my friend and the guy, like one of the guys I actually play Gloomhaven with, and we played a bit of the Gloomhaven online, and it's very slow to play online because like kind of like slow and laggy, and then each enemy, when they do a move, they all have to do it. So like there's an iconic turn that goes on when the guard enemies decide to like do their one where they like shield up and like, you know, that's what they do for the turn. But they have this long animation where they go like, they like growl, they go like, ugh, and they like hit their swords
like
together.
Wakanda Forever almost.
Yeah, they kind of like, ugh, and like then, but like if there's 6 guards on the map, they all do it in order. They don't do it at the same time. So we always laugh like, oh, here it goes again. And then since that's happened every time we see a guard when we're playing the game physically, at least one of us does the thing. Because it just was so funny that it would take so incredibly long. So we saw this and we're like, that's so fucking cool. Like imagine being on one of those Switch commercials where you're like all sitting at the roof on a rooftop. What are we gonna do? And someone's like, oh well, let's play our Switches. And then we considered like you're doing that with your Switches and like how long and laggy it probably will be. But at the same time, it's fucking Gloomhaven. If you have to, stab yourself in between turns, and that's the only way you're allowed to play Gloomhaven, it's still worth playing Gloomhaven.
God. So,
even if it doesn't run well, buy Gloomhaven, play it on your Switch, have the best time ever. Be the Play Carol, have fun.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's the review from someone that's played 25 years of Gloomhaven in her life. So there you go. Just Dance, Kate, your prediction came true. Just Dance, you didn't predict it for this showcase though, did you? But you did say it would exist. Yeah, but you did say...
normally this game is shown at like 32 different of the conferences of the presentations, and we got it here. So finally it showed up. I think it looks fun. It's Just Dance. I don't think anyone was at a Panda this time, so that's unfortunate.
No, they weren't. I think this game only comes to Switch now. Oops, that was an accident, everybody. I think this game's only on Switch now. I think that's why, because there's nothing else with motion controls or like the camera anymore.
Right. I guess that makes sense that it would suit that platform. But you know what? I say Just Dance is always fun. I think if you can't have fun playing Just Dance, you gotta loosen up a little bit.
Fair enough. I mean, look at these people. They're loose as hell. Look at they're ready to go, ready to dance. Okay. Silent Hope was after this. This is another RPG here with ever-changing dungeons, which sounds kind of interesting. I like the art around it. Like, I don't know if this chibi style is for everybody, but I like the way it kind of has this colorful landscape that you're exploring, which is kind of cool. I mean, I don't know if the combat looks great is the only thing. Like, it just kind of is going to blur into the background, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is, just one of those extra games that, maybe a younger audience really enjoys. It's funny you mentioned the art. I really love the like hand-drawn art for all of like the menus and those like cutscenes. I think that's gorgeous, but the chibi stuff just really
you don't like
doesn't
it, hey?
I love the chibi cow, actually. That chibi cow is adorable. The rest of it, it's not my style.
Yeah, interesting.
It reminds me of Bravely Default, actually, but
I think that's why I like it. Actually, I think I grew to like it playing Bravely Default, which is kind of interesting because I don't know if I love Bravely Default, but for some reason that art style stuck with me. Okay, let's move along. It's Fae Farm. This is like a very soft-looking kind of farming sim that's got a bit of mystical stuff. I don't know if we have a lot to say. I really like the yak. Like, that character is really nice. Look at him.
Yeah, I like the other cow that kind of looks like a mime as well.
The mime cow, yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those farming games, and that's
I like that you water your plants with that cloud that hovers over that guy's head. Like, that was pretty creative.
The kind of like magic element to it is a fun little wrinkle for sure.
There you go. Power to you, people that want to play Fae Farm. Next up, Hot Wheels, or what is this? We didn't get a trailer for this either, did we? Hot Wheels Unleashed 2? Did we?
Did.
I think I checked out of this one, to be honest. I think I got some water at this point.
I mean, this is just a new Hot Wheels racing game. I think it's super cute that it's like the constructed tracks, like those little loop-to-loopy, like orange tracks we used to have. Super fun. I mean, it's not Mario Kart. It's not Diddy Kong Racing.
Yeah.
It's less fun than those games probably, but I like the flavoring on it. I think it's a cute idea.
Hey, speaking of games I like the flavoring on, you ever wanted to play Overcooked but you're Mechanics instead? Because that's exactly what Manic Mechanics is. And, we've seen a lot of games kind of going for that look recently, but I think out of all of them that we've seen, because there was that one where you're running the back and the front of the kitchen, and then, the restaurant. Yeah. There was, I feel like a couple others.
Yeah, there's one where you're like a moving crew and you have to get furniture out of the house at time.
Yeah. I think this one looks like the most fun. Like, if I was to sit down right now and say, we're going to get a couple friends together and play one of these, I think I would pick Manic Mechanics just from the trailer.
I agree. Like, it's different enough from Overcooked, and also looks like there's a lot of extra little like mini games to do. Like, they're all like driving their cars on that track that one time on the map, and like, there's a lot of like hazards. That one guy at one point just gets full on run over by a car, and like that's pretty awful. But it looks like there's just like a little more put into it as opposed to like how do we reflavor Overcooked and sell a new game. So
yeah, maybe we'll play it at some point. Who knows? If it goes on sale, maybe I'll buy it on the Switch and we can have a little Manic Mechanic night. Be kind of fun. Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope DLC. I think we're both in the same boat of this one. We'd love to play Sparks of Hope at some point, but who knows when that'll be. And I probably won't end up ever getting to the DLC, even though I'm sure it'll be good.
It seems like the best strategy at this point is just to like wait until there's a sale with DLC included and pick it up, because the first game was awesome. This game just looks like, the first game but bigger. It's gonna be fun despite the Rabbids. It's gonna be a good time. And this DLC is cool. I really like the the look of it. Like it's so vibrant and colorful, and if you just pretend the rabbits aren't there, it looks like a beautiful Mario game. So
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like it does have that Mario kind of style to it, like Mario would go to some of these worlds, maybe not like this exact one, but it has that Nintendo kind of charm of like going to different places that I think translates
mhm.
really well into like the strategic combat instead of platforming. So I think that's the reason the game is so much fun. So, on top of the fact that the combat's actually challenging in a way that you would want in those strategy games. But yeah, in spite of the rabbit, that's for sure. Oh man. Okay, so Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. This is my intrigued game of the show.
Mm,
So I played Dragon Quest 11, my first ever Dragon Quest game, a couple of years ago now when I got my Xbox, and I really liked it. It was a fun kind of classic style RPG. Does everything you'd expect from like a JRPG, but it does it all really well. And so on top of that, it also has the art style that I really like from the Dragon Ball Z guy. What's his name? Uh, it's one of those artists, Akira Toriyama, right? Everyone knows this guy's
mhm.
name. Anyway, I think it's a great combination. I'm excited to see how they can translate that into one of our favorite things as well, a creature catching game, where again you can combine the creatures from the Dragon Quest universe, similar to Cassette Beast that we just played. So I don't know. I'm just in a good moment to be interested by this game. But I think some of the Dragon Quest spin-offs can be a little hit and miss, so that's why I kind of put it as intrigued, because there's potential for this to be like very gotcha or very like grindy in certain ways. So this is actually a longer running series, though. It's not the first version of this. I actually did some looking into it. The last game was in 2016, and it came out on the 3DS in the West, and it got around like scores around an 8. So it's actually kind of promising, but yeah, I'm interested in this for sure. I think it could be pretty cool.
Hmm. Yeah, I basically agree with everything you said. Like, I don't have a Dragon Quest history. Aside from playing him in Smash Bros, that's been my only exposure. But yeah, this game was cool. I like the art. I like a lot of the monster design. It's kind of like some of them remind me a bit of like Persona creatures, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of cute. Like, not so much the slimes, but that like demon guy
Some of the
with
more
the
like
axe.
bigger
Like,
demony ones, yeah.
yeah, they're kind of a little Persona-y for me. I'm always on board for having some creature capture games in my back pocket when I start to feel like maybe I want to play Pokemon again, and I'm like, wait, no, I can just play this one. It's good. And yeah, like I got my fingers crossed. I hope you buy this game and you like it, and then I can play
Yeah, I mean, I'm also hoping it comes
it.
to Game Pass, because Dragon Quest 11 did. I don't have to
That's
necessarily play
true.
this on launch, because it'll be something I probably won't have time for at the moment. But if it comes to Game Pass, like, I'm in for sure.
Hmm. And I will say too, speaking of the cassette based comparison, the fusions actually look cool in this one, where the fusions and cassette beast were just hilarious.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's maybe another
I
point.
mean, I guess that's part of the advantage of being made by a giant studio instead of Cassette Beast. But yeah, maybe one day Cassette Beast could be on this scale. That'd be so cool.
Mhm.
Next up, Pikmin 4. And back to back, I'm going to go. This Pikmin 4 is my winner of the show here
Nice.
today. Admittedly, a game I'm already, pretty excited for, and probably the only Switch game left this year that I'm legitimately considering buying when it comes out, just because it's always been a series that I've been interested in. And I think this has just like really sold me, this trailer today. Or not today. Well, we're watching it right now, but not, we saw this a little while ago. But I just love the way they're kind of doing the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids thing. I know it's always been a Pikmin theme, but, it just seems like such an expansive world. You can do your character creation now. You have this dog, which just has all these different abilities that kind of expand what you can do. It seems a lot more free form than older Pikmin, that was really restricted by like day and night cycles and having to do things in a time limit. And this game, instead, you get like different sorts of Pikmin and ways around those barriers, and you just have to deal with those, times of day differently. And then the fact too that they introduced later, you can go like straight up underground. It's like a Tears of the Kingdom situation going on here, with like a whole nother sort of map. So it just seems like such a big game, and the puzzles look fun. The world is interesting. I love the Pikmin themselves. Like, I'm just really interested in this.
That's awesome. I think this is cool. Like, this is the kind of game where like I want to be somewhat involved in someone else playing it, but not play it myself. Like, those kind of games where like I don't
Mm-hmm,
want to
mm-hmm.
commit to it, but like I have an interest in kind of like, seeing the highlights out of the game. So I think Pikmin's cool. Like, it's such a weird and unusual franchise, and like there really isn't anything else like it. Like, I know we played that one game on Game Pass recently,
Yeah,
which is similar kind of like
Tinykin.
Tinykin, which is very much in the vein of Pikmin
So
or like
on
heavily
Tinykin,
inspired by it. But like,
I heard someone on a different podcast. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's a really interesting comparison. Say that Tinykin is a mixture of Pikmin and Super Mario Odyssey.
that's very accurate. I think that is exactly the
I've
case.
never like that's a great
Um,
analogy.
which is great, and I loved Super Mario Odyssey, so I think that bridged the gap for me to get into more of like a Pikmin style game, which I don't know if it appeals to me otherwise. But after having played Tinykin, I'm more interested in Pikmin. But yeah, I think it's cute. I think my biggest problem is like I don't know if I love the way the game looks. I think it's technically great, but I just don't know if I love the art style as much. And so like
It's a little bug
exploring the
snacksy,
world
isn't
with
it?
it's a little bug snacksy. I don't love the creatures. Aside from there is a watermelon elephant, and I think he's amazing. Otherwise, like I don't like the way the dog looks. It's just kind of like it's a little ugly in a way, but not technically, but just in terms of like the
I know what you're
style.
saying. I
I
know what
find
you're
a little
saying.
ugly.
It's just not your
But like,
art
because
style.
I feel like a lot of this is like exploration based, it's kind of harder to want to explore a world that's less like pleasing to you. Um, but I like the ghost Pikmin as an addition. I think that they look super cool. I love that they're sort of alien-y, greeny, ghosty, like ethereal sort of thing. I hope it gets supernatural horror in the end. But it didn't work for Bugsnax, it might work for Pikmin.
Yeah, we will
So
see. The
yeah, we'll
jury's
see.
out on that one, but I'll let you know later in I think September when this game comes out. After that, another collection, we have Metal Gear Solid 1. I think we'll probably skip over this pretty quick, just considering the time here, and we've not played Metal Gear, but salute to you, Solid Snake. Go ahead, Solid Snake. You do you. I want to play these games one day, but this is not the day. Vampire Survivors is coming to Switch. I have no idea how the hell this game is going to run, because I know that later on in the game, when enough stuff starts happening, it actually starts to lag on like other consoles. So from what I've heard, so I don't know how the hell it's going to happen here, but power to you, especially with 4-player co-op, which is awesome. And I definitely want to try the co-op at one point with like you and Alex and whoever wants to come and do it, because I think it would just be chaos. Sounds like a lot of fun. Headbangers Rhythm Royale. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking here, Kate, and I put this down as my loser of the show. And I don't know why. Like, I don't want to be a hater, but I just have to be honest. Like, I found this like cacophonous. Like, I didn't enjoy the sound of it. Like, it was just offbeat, and like I know it's supposed to be funny, but it just something about it like made me really off put. And like, it's colorful and funny, but like this, I don't know, the rhythm game doesn't look that complicated here. You're just kind of tapping a button, and the sound, I don't know, like I just couldn't get myself behind this. It's just something about it.
I will be honest, it does kind of look bad. That's fair. But I wrote down in my notes beside it, which is very funny for what's going to happen later in the show. My notes say, "Do I love this?" Question mark. Is this WarioWare rhythm games? I hope it's free. So, fun little teaser for later in the show. If this is a free-to-play game, I'm totally going to try it out, because I like rhythm games. You know, it reminds me very much of like, what was that one that came to PlayStation? Fall Guys. It's got that kind of vibe. Do I think it's good? No. Could it be fun to play for a couple nights and get the snail costume for your guy?
100%. I want that big $ necklace for mine if we play. Okay, Penny's Big Breakaway. This is a big platformer, and it's from the makers of who is it? Was this the Sonic Mania makers that made this? This is from the makers of a big game anyway. Or like a reasonably big game. Anyway,
I don't know. I'm gonna look it up, but
this is a kind of a 3D platforming game. You're playing as a mouse. She has a yo-yo as kind of her unique mechanic. So she uses it to ride on it and roll down hills, or it hangs in the air and she swings off of it, or kind of pulls herself towards the yo-yo like a slingshot. It's actually pretty smartly used. She can use it like a motorcycle somehow, and then do like this. It attaches to poles as she goes up, and it kind of can swing around and then launch in one direction. So some cool stuff. I mean, who knows how it's going to turn out, but I think it looks cool. And we don't see enough games like this, like we don't get enough of these classic 3D platformers, and I think it's because a lot of the time they rely on like the magic of nostalgia, right? Unless they're made really, really well. But maybe this is the one. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that this one looks like it has a lot of potential. Like I could see this being like a Hat in Time kind of game where like it's a smaller studio or like it's a smaller game. It's not like, one of the big elite platform guys, but if it feels good, I could see it doing incredibly well. Like the yo-yo thing is neat. It has a lot of potential of like different ways that you could use it. I actually think this game, like as long as it feels good to move around, I could see it being a fantastic platformer. Like just the creativity in using the yo-yos alone seems really well thought out to me. My only complaint about this game, and it's totally a personal thing, is I just really don't like the clown aesthetic.
Mm.
Like, it's very big, bright, like circus. She's got like kind of clown makeup a little bit, and she's like the yo-yos get turned into like a big like circus ball that she can ride on. And I just think like I just hate that kind of like big, loud,
Kate's against the
over
circus,
the top.
everybody.
I hate the circus. They don't treat lions well. I just hate the circus. But,
uh,
it looks good. Like, it looks like it feels good to play. And I
yeah,
might get over my
agreed.
fear of circus. I don't know.
I agree.
We'll see.
This also is the Sonic Mania developers, so it's kind of interesting
Sonic
to
Mania.
note that because that's something that makes it stand out a little bit more than just being a
Mm.
random kind of team. After this was a contender for my loser. Mario Kart 8 DLC is always exciting. Like Mario Kart 8, legit, like one of the best games on the system. But I mean, I'm not excited to play as Petey Piranha and Wiggler and Kamek. Like,
Okay, but do you want to play as Wiggler in the Wiggler car? Because that is kind of hilarious and also kind of terrifying. Like, what is the Wiggler car then if Wiggler's here?
It's
Kind of
obviously
like
it's obviously a car
it's kind
just
of like
built in
a
his likeness.
gingerbread situation, right? It's like the gingerbread man. He's like, am I made of wall or is the wall made of flesh? He does not know. So
Oh
he
my god.
screams.
Nintendo does not
And
realize what they've done with the lore of Mario
yeah,
with
they've
this
opened
DLC
up
pack.
a big can of Wiggler worms with them.
A big can of Wigglers, you should have said.
Big can of Wigglers.
Oh my god. Okay, after that, Star Ocean Second Story R, big RPG. This is one I have like no touch point for, but I know people love Star Ocean, and so this is one of those 2.5D remakes that people are probably going to go crazy for. I would imagine because it looks like these games are always so stunning with this sort of 2D paper
Yeah,
mache style. Like it's just always such a shock to see it, even though like you've seen games like it, but you're just like, man, how can it look so good? And it does.
yeah. This game is gorgeous. I wrote down sci-fi octopath,
Mm-hmm.
which is how I categorized this game in my brain, and like it looks so nice. It's
One of the
gorgeous,
things.
and I feel like
Oh, go
oh
ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No.
I was only going to make a point. We're looking at the menu right now on the video, and I love. And Final Fantasy XVI does this. We probably talked about this earlier in the show, but when they have like these pixel art characters like in the menus to display for like a
Mm-hmm.
mini version of the actual character art, like I just love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Every single game should do that.
Every single time I say Final Fantasy, I look at the little pixel sprites jumping for joy, and I'm like, yes, it's so cute. Yeah. Yeah, no, this game was cool. This game was cool.
All right, let's move along here.
Here we go. This is my game winner.
I knew it.
I'm buying this game. We got a new WarioWare, everyone. WarioWare Move It with the motion controls on the Switch. Like, I'm sorry, but you're coming over, you're having a beer, and you're playing this game like the day it comes.
I can't wait. It's not often
For
Kate
those-
declares so vehemently that she's going to buy a Nintendo game. She's like, I'm buying it right now, but there's no way you are obligated to buy this.
I am obligated by this. So for those of you who just haven't had the joys of ever playing WarioWare with me, I'm like, I would go pro. Like, I don't know what it is about WarioWare micro games, because like I'm good at Mario Party. Like, I definitely hold my own. I can tussle with the best in a Mario Party game. But there's something about the micro games in WarioWare that like I will just like I get into like a Matrix style zone, and I'm like, if I could go pro, if there's a pro scene in WarioWare, I'm on it. It's like the one game I can do. And so I feel a little obligated to buy it, but also like it looks so fun. Like the games are always like stupid and silly, but also like I like that it's the touch screen or like a motion control. So you get up, you gotta move around. Like it just
Mhm.
looks so great to play with your friends
Yeah,
and,
and
and make them
there'd be
do
so many like
ridiculous Wario games.
and there's the detractors too that would say, well, you don't actually have to do the actions. Like you could just sit on the couch, right? And you could, but like
Mhm.
you're at your own detriment. You're not going to enjoy the game as much, right? It's like playing Just Dance from the couch. Like if you want to buy it and get the full experience, like why would you not just be silly and do it? Like
Yeah,
it's part of the game.
exactly. Like, if that's how you want to play it at your house, fine. But if you're coming over to my house to play WarioWare, like you're standing up, like we're moving the coffee table, we're standing up, we're wiggling, we're waving,
Yeah,
like you shake your body,
and I love the one too,
like
like the
shake
co-op
pop.
ones. The co-op ones too, where there's like someone who's trying to dry the other person off, so the one person has to like rotate themselves, and then the other person has to like wave the towel. It's so
Right?
funny.
Like, it's so funny. Like this $80 I'm in.
Could you
Like
imagine being
I
on a
will.
team with someone and you're like, okay, are you gonna dry me off? Like, it's so
But
funny.
the thing is too, is like because they go so quickly, you get so into them.
Mm-hmm.
Like it
It's the
becomes
pace.
this thing where like I'm not like I'm like not seriously competitive, but like I want to win WarioWare so badly, and so like if my partner is not ready to twist while I'm wiping them down, it just it's so fun. This is
Oh my
my
god.
winner of the showcase.
Awesome.
Like
Yeah.
day one purchase. There's like a few games I will day one purchase in a year. It's God of War Ragnarok, it's Elden Ring, it's WarioWare Move It. The three games.
The cream of the crop right there, everybody.
Exactly. The holy trinity of games I will pre-order.
Um okay, we'll finish up here. There's a Nintendo Live event in Seattle. We will not be going, but that's pretty cool. Hopefully one comes here one time. Maybe it'd be fun to go. There's also Tears of the Kingdom amiibos, and then the show closed off with Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is very exciting. New 2D Mario game. Yeah, maybe go ahead. What do you think of this game? Go take it away.
Yeah, so I'm gonna back to back it as well. This is my entry game for good because these games, like, we've played so many of these Mario games now. They're always fun. It looks incredible. Like the art, it's so soft
Mm-hmm.
now. Like something about the colors, like the pastels. It looks
It
so
looks like it's
nice.
made of plasticine. Like that stuff you play with as a kid, like or Play-Doh or whatever. Like
Yeah,
it looks like really well made of that.
yeah, it kind of does. It's got that sort of like would sort of like if you were to push it, it would kind of like it would hold its shape, but it would like concave a little bit.
How do we get onto this topic?
I don't know. But anyway, the crazy part about this is it's Mario, but then you go into these like weird dream sequences and everything's going crazy. Like the pipes are moving around, like Harry Potter staircase style, and they're like wiggling, and like this pipe's now a worm. And it's basically just like Mario like drug trip. And like look at this, it's like limbo all of a sudden, and you're like you become like that long cat where someone like lifts the cat up and he's really long. And like just weird shit seems to be happening all the time. And this just looks like an absolute blast of like the best moments in a Nintendo game where there's just like pure like fun and joy happening around you at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the way the game ends is that you get an elephant power up. And for anyone who knows, snails are my favorite animal and slugs. And my second favorite animal is the elephant. So and of
Well,
the two, I think it's probably more fun to be an elephant than a
Elephant
snail.
Mario's made for you, Kate. Made for you.
He's so chunky and I love him. So yeah, I want to play this game like
Yeah.
so badly.
Yeah, no,
It
it looks
looks
fun.
really
I like the way that they're keeping the multiplayer aspect intact, like you said. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't detract anything from the game because you could literally just play it single player and have that same experience. But it's like such an added value proposition that you could bring over friends at any time and like have them play along with you in a game like this. And like it's so good for teaching new people as well. Like if someone hasn't really played a game before, because they can almost watch you like a real-time ghost, and like other games,
Mhm.
and you can teach people how to play. Like I think that's a really interesting aspect of like
Mhm.
family friendliness that Nintendo games, they often fall into that category at like the Game Awards, but I think it's a real tangible thing for a game like this, which is a cool aspect. And like you said,
Mhm.
like the creativity here is just crazy. Like I love when similar to like Donkey Kong Country Returns, like the shadowed levels where it's like everything's blacked out and the colors kind of in the background. That's super cool. And just like like you said with the Nintendo creativity, there's always so many cool ideas they have for these games, and like the way everything moves around. And I'm really impressed with the way they're kind of taking like a dream or like wonder in this, because I think that opens them up to like really change it up, like really include some out of the box stuff that just makes very little sense. And it's not like Mario games are logical, but you'll always, when you're in the desert environment, you always know, well, the sun's probably going to show up, and like, oh, these fire enemies will be here. But it's Super Mario Wonder. Like, you might hit one of these boxes and who knows what's going to happen at any point. Like, that's very intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've not that there's ever like a lot of very strict rules, but they've given themselves a framework in which the possibilities are endless. And like this must have just been such a fun game to develop, in terms of like I would love to have sat in on like a meeting and this is like, okay, so like, we've got these big hippos and they're inflating in their big balls, and like what else do we want to do with them? And they're like, I don't know. What if like, there was a stampede of sheep and then they kick the flag over and then you have to continue on the level and like some other crazy stuff happens, and it's just like crazy fun the whole time. Like it's not trying to be like every game has to be some like serious Naughty Dog masterpiece of like a story that's gonna resonate with you and like be the pinnacle of what a game can achieve. It's like sometimes it can just be weird and fun and creative, and like that's also perfectly valid.
Did you see all those roller skates that Wiggler was wearing? Like, man, this is 2023 is the year of Wiggler. This boy's coming to Mario Kart. He's in Mario Wonder. Like, man, you do it, Wiggler. Okay. So that's the Nintendo Direct.
They opened a big can of Wigglers.
Big can of Wigglers. Speaking of a big can of Wigglers, this has been a big-ass podcast episode because we've recapped this for nearly an hour. I'm sure we talked about Final Fantasy for nearly an hour. So I guess that makes up for the fact that we actually did not have an episode last week. So apologies for that. We'll probably bring it up the top of the episode. But yeah. Any final thoughts on the Direct before we get out of here for the show? I think it was a great show overall. There was some really fun stuff in this one.
Oh, agreed. Overall, great Direct. I had a blast watching it. Nintendo's always a fun one. Yeah. 10 out of 10 will buy WarioWare.
Nice. Okay, recap. 10 out of 10 will buy WarioWare, will buy Pikmin, and we're creating a Skyrim award for most released game of all time. Giving it to Batman Arkham Trilogy. There we go. Yes. Okay. Well, until next time, everybody, this has been Cloud Control, the gaming podcast that's not just good, it's good enough. We'll see you on the next episode.